Previously, the Korean team kept fighting off the ants heading back to their nest. Yunho asked Choi to crank up his attack power, but Choi warned that if he did, they'd probably run out of oxygen in that place. And all the Korean hunters could do was rely on Choi's fire attacks to get out of this mess. As Choi started to struggle and the ants pressed closer, in a flash, a shadow warrior emerged, stopping the attacking ants in their tracks. Yunho was shocked and wondered who this Black Knight was. He felt like he'd seen it before. The shadow then sent a signal back to Jinwoo, who was in the city. Realizing how critical the situation was, Jinwoo immediately activated his skill, Return. Meanwhile, a cameraman freaked out as two huge ants charged straight for him. Fear filled his face as he resigned himself to his fate. Suddenly, both ants were pierced by a sword, which was Igris's sword. Meanwhile, back at the broadcasting station in Korea, the crew shut down the live broadcast after seeing the desperate condition of the S-rank hunters who were on the brink of death. One of the crew members told the broadcasting chief that they were getting flooded with complaints from viewers. The chief felt like the broadcast couldn't go on, but just as he was about to give the order to shut things down, a crew member reported a mysterious figure suddenly showing up at the raid site. The chief stared at the monitor in disbelief and ordered the broadcast to continue no matter what. Deep down, he knew Korea's fate was now in the hands of this hunter. Meanwhile, Jinwoo had arrived at Jeju Island, right in the middle of the ant monster nest. Calm but determined, Jinwoo stood at the front lines with all his shadow warriors, facing down the hundreds of ants ready to strike. Jinwoo called for Iron, and without hesitation, Iron activated his taunting cry skill, provoking all the ants in the nest. Jinwoo smiled, impressed by Iron's growing smarts. Then, he readied himself for battle, gripping the Demon King's dagger. In the blink of an eye, Jinwoo moved like lightning, slashing and cutting down several ant monsters in one deadly sweep. From behind, Tusk activated a magic barrier to protect the wounded hunters. Ma Dongwook watched in confusion, not sure what was happening. Yunho explained that with Jinwoo's presence, they didn't need to worry anymore. Meanwhile, Jinwoo was moving non-stop, slashing ants at a speed too fast to follow. Beside him, Igris showcased his deadly swordsmanship, taking down enemies with incredible precision. Iron went wild, tearing through every ant that dared to come near, while Tank unleashed brutal attacks, easily swallowing up several ants. In the middle of the fierce battle, Jinwoo realized they needed to end this fast. Standing among the scattered ant corpses, he calmly said one word, "Arise." In seconds, the dead ant bodies were taken over and transformed into new shadow warriors with a dark, menacing aura. The cameraman watching the scene felt a chill run down his spine, unable to believe what he was seeing. Moments later, the cameraman got a direct order from the broadcasting center to air the footage immediately, as the whole country was watching the event live. On the battlefield, the shadow ants launched an attack, mercilessly slaughtering the other ants without hesitation. As the battle raged on, Jinwoo approached the injured hunters and handed out potions to heal them. The hunters were bewildered, shocked to see their wounds disappear as if what had just happened was beyond their understanding. Jinwoo then checked on Hunter Cha's condition, while Ma Dongwook looked worried because Cha was still unconscious. Jinwoo stated that Cha was in critical condition, and his current power wasn't enough to heal him. With the ant nest temporarily cleared, Jinwoo ordered the hunters to leave before more ants swarmed in. Suddenly, Jinwoo felt a terrifying aura from a new monster ant entering the nest. The monster approached, mumbling something about searching for a king. Yunho was shocked to see the Ant King and realized that Ruji might be dead. Jinwoo stood up and told Ma Dongwook to take care of Hunter Cha while he faced the Ant King. The Ant King walked up to Jinwoo and asked if he was the king of humans. Jinwoo responded sarcastically, asking if now even insects could talk to him. Jinwoo and the Ant King stood facing each other, each radiating an intimidating aura. Then, the Ant King provoked Jinwoo by releasing an even more intense aura. Jinwoo grinned and said, "Now you seem more like a bug." Meanwhile, the Korean television media was reporting what came in from the broadcasting center. The report confirmed that Hunter Min Byung-gyu was dead, and the fate of the other hunters in the ant nest was still unknown. But then, the situation took a turn when a hunter appeared on the scene and changed everything, allowing the raid broadcast to continue. The public was shocked to see Hunter Sung Jinwoo on Jeju Island, facing off against the Ant King. On the other side, Matsumoto, the chairman of the Japanese Hunter Association, was furious about the ants killing Go Teruji. Reiji reported that the Ant King had reappeared in the nest. Matsumoto angrily asked if this meant that the Korean hunter was still alive. Reiji confirmed it, saying that now someone with magical power equivalent to the Ant King had appeared. Matsumoto cursed the situation and ordered his assistant to turn on the raid broadcast in Korea immediately. Meanwhile, in Jinwoo's mother's apartment, she called Ji-na to help turn on the TV. She was worried and told Ji-na that her brother had just stepped out. Ji-na started to feel suspicious and rushed to her brother's room. When she opened her phone, her face went pale in shock. Her brother was already on Jeju Island. Even Mr. Go Gunhee was excited to see Hunter Sung Jinwoo on the screen, saving hunters during the raid on Jeju Island. Back in the middle of the battle, after releasing an intense aura, the Ant King suddenly struck Jinwoo with a heavy punch. The blow destroyed the ground beneath him, creating a huge explosion. The hunters, feeling the impact, began to worry, thinking Jinwoo had been severely injured by such a powerful attack. The Ant King sneered, calling Jinwoo weak and saying he wasn't the true king. However, as the smoke slowly cleared, Jinwoo stood tall, completely unscathed. The hunters were stunned. They couldn't believe Jinwoo had survived that brutal attack without a scratch. Jinwoo immediately counterattacked. Using his Dominator's touch skill, he pulled the Ant King toward him. In a flash, Jinwoo slammed his fist into the Ant King's face, sending the creature flying into a cave wall. The hunters couldn't believe their eyes. They wondered how a mage like Jinwoo could possess such physical strength. Even though the Ant King was thrown back, he quickly got up and attacked again. Ant King struck with both arms, but Jinwoo calmly blocked using his left arm. The impact shattered the ground beneath them. Jinwoo retaliated instantly, but was hit at the same time. They hit each other on the head, creating a huge energy wave around them. Even the cameraman almost fainted from the energy wave. The break on his head armor got Ant King's attention, and he was curious about this human. But Jinwoo didn't give him a chance to think and hit him with another powerful punch. Ant King hit back with his own fist. The two punches collided with a tremendous crash, creating a massive energy wave that sent them flying in opposite directions. Ant King was surprised. He couldn't believe his protective armor had cracked from Jinwoo's blow. But before the Ant King could think any further, Jinwoo quickly got close and hit him hard in the stomach. Ant King immediately went on the offensive, firing a mouth attack that scratched Jinwoo's cheek. Jinwoo immediately backed off to keep his distance, but then suddenly fell to his knees, realizing he'd been poisoned. Ant King said it was a paralyzing poison he got from a poisonous snail, and he'd made it more deadly by using his magic. He was sure the human in front of him would be dead by now. The scene shifts to the Japanese team in the ruins of Jeju Island. Hoshino, trembling, admitted Ant King was unbeatable, even for Go Teruji. Frustrated, Kane scoffs at Hoshino's weakness and decides it's best to leave, worried they'll run into more trouble if they stay any longer. As a helicopter approached to evacuate them, the scene returned to the ant nest, where Ant King went up to Jinwoo, who was paralyzed from the poison, and delivered a final blow to finish him off. But in an instant, Jinwoo caught Ant King's attack with his hand, and countered with a crushing punch that sent the giant creature flying into the wall. A system notification popped up. Poison cure has been completed. That meant the poison in Jinwoo's body had been totally neutralized. He could see that Ant King seemed agitated and cornered by the situation. Despite the advantage, Jinwoo's thoughts turned to Hunter Cha's worsening condition. He knows he needs to finish this fight quickly before it's too late. With lightning speed, Jinwoo darts toward the Ant King and delivers an aerial kick. The ground shatters under the impact, but the Ant King narrowly dodges by jumping into the air. The Ant King mutters to himself that his poison has no effect and that physical strength is useless against this human. He realizes that speed is the only way he can win. The Ant King boosts all of his stats into agility. His body becomes leaner, and deadly claws extend from his hands, glowing with a menacing aura. Jinwoo calmly draws his Demon King dagger. They stare each other down, preparing for the next round. The Ant King strikes first, moving at an incredible speed, but Jinwoo deftly dodges and counters with a strike from his dagger. However, the Ant King blocks the attack with his claws, and the Ant King knocks Jinwoo into a wall, but Jinwoo quickly uses the wall to propel himself back into the fight. They continue exchanging strikes so fast that it's almost impossible to keep up. The Ant King is shocked to realize that Jinwoo not only matches his speed, but is even faster than him. Meanwhile, Jinwoo thinks to himself that this ant might be on par with the Demon Monarch, or maybe even stronger. Despite that, he's confident that his dagger will only grow stronger after defeating this foe. Jinwoo delivers a flurry of slashes, breaking through the Ant King's armor and claws. Seeing an opportunity, Jinwoo decides to end the fight. Activating his Vital Strike skill, he attacks all the Ant King's vital areas with pinpoint precision. A system notification popped up. Vital Strike skill has been upgraded to Mutilate level Max. Jinwoo is surprised by the upgrade in the middle of the battle, but it only strengthens his resolve to finish this quickly. The Ant King attempts to flee, but Jinwoo isn't going to let him get away. He pursues the Ant King at lightning speed, activating the Mutilate skill. A barrage of slashes rains down on the Ant King's body from all directions, cutting off one of his arms. The Ant King tries to retaliate with his claws, but Jinwoo expertly dodges and maintains control of the fight. The Ant King, now cornered, wonders if he'll actually lose to a human. In his mind, there's still one way to turn the tide. He quickly releases a wave of magic energy to summon his ant army. In the blink of an eye, thousands of soldier ants fill the battlefield. The Ant King challenges Jinwoo with this move, as if asking what he'll do now. But Jinwoo just smiles and says one word: "Go forth." Instantly, Jinwoo's shadow expands, and one by one, his shadow minions appear behind him, ready to face the incoming army of ants. The Ant King is taken aback by this sight. Without a word, the two forces charge at each other. Igris, wielding his sword, slices through the ants in front of him, while the High Orc generals tear into them with brutal efficiency. Jinwoo orders Tusk to eliminate all the ants with his fire magic. Before Tusk can act, Jinwoo sternly warns him to only target the ants. If any humans are hurt by his attacks, Jinwoo won't summon him again. Tusk understands the command and activates his Hymn of Giant skill, transforming into a massive giant. With his enlarged body, Tusk activates the Hymn of Fire Dragon. In an instant, he unleashes a huge, devastating blast of fire aimed directly at the ant colony. The attack is so powerful it even pierces through the volcanic mountain where the ants have made their nest. The hunters couldn't believe their eyes. They think Jinwoo looks like a demon king descending to Earth. The fire attack consumes the entire ant army, leaving only the Ant King behind. Frustration fills the Ant King. Since his birth, he has always believed he was destined to be the strongest, an endlessly evolving predator. He's devoured everything in his path, standing at the top of the food chain, and sees himself as a true monarch. But his view changes when Jinwoo steps through the smoke. Fear starts to grip him. In a panic, he decides his only option is to flee. Activating healing magic to restore his condition, he takes off into the air, attempting to escape. But Jinwoo isn't having it. He activates his Dominator's touch skill and slams the Ant King hard into the ground. Standing before him, Jinwoo prepares to deliver judgment. The Ant King, powerless, still tries to crawl away, but Jinwoo has already decided how this ends. He jumps into the air, activates Mutilate, and unleashes a series of strikes that rain down on the Ant King's body, ending his life in an instant. A system notification popped up. You defeated the enemy. You leveled up. After the fight was over, Yunho approached Jinwoo and explained that Hunter Cha's condition was critical. Jinwoo quickly checked and realized he had already wasted too much time. He needed to find a hunter healer immediately. Shadow Exchange was still on cooldown, and while he could get to the city quickly by riding Kaisel, there was a real risk that Hunter Cha wouldn't survive long enough. Suddenly, something clicked in Jinwoo's mind. He turned to the cameraman and asked him to shut off the camera for a moment. At first, the cameraman refused. It was a live broadcast after all, but something in Jinwoo's tone made him hesitate. Jinwoo then ordered his shadow warriors to search for Hunter Min Byung-yu's body. It didn't take long. One of the high orc shadow generals returned, carrying the lifeless form of Min Byung-yu. Jinwoo scanned the body, grimacing when he noticed that the Ant King had likely devoured the head. Doubt crept in. Will this even work? But just then, a notification popped up. Shadow extraction can be used on this target. Yunho, clearly confused, asked Jinwoo what he was doing with Byung-yu's body. Jinwoo ignored him, stepping closer to the corpse. He uttered a single word, "Arise." A dark shadow began to creep out of Min Byung-yu's body, but then a notification interrupted. You failed to extract the shadow. Jinwoo frowned and tried again, but the result was the same. It didn't make sense. With his summoning skill at this level, it should have worked easily. Yet it felt as if Min Byung-yu's spirit was resisting, refusing to be summoned. Jinwoo hesitated for a moment. He knew this looked demonic, like something evil trying to summon the dead, but someone's life was on the line. He had to save Hunter Cha. Gritting his teeth, he tried once more. Arise. This time, the corpse reacted. A dense, black shadow enveloped Min Byung-yu's body. Yunho shouted angrily, demanding an explanation for what Jinwoo was doing to Byung-yu's remains. But his anger quickly turned into shock as Byung-yu's body began to rise. Min Byung-yu had become a shadow warrior. The other hunters froze in place, stunned and a little terrified by the sheer power that defied all logic. Without any orders, Shadow Min Byung-yu began moving toward Hunter Cha. Calmly, he activated his healing magic, saving her life just as she teetered on the edge of death. Yunho watched the scene unfold with pure disbelief. Jinwoo, noticing Yunho's expression, explained that he could sense a person's nature when they were alive. For Byung-yu, his healer instincts remained so strong that he acted on his own, without commands. The cameraman stood in shock, unable to process what he'd just witnessed. He now understood why Jinwoo had asked him to turn the camera off. A power like this, raising the dead, couldn't be broadcasted to the entire world. Yunho placed a hand on Jinwoo's shoulder, his voice calm yet firm. He admitted that Jinwoo would do incredible things in the future. He believed Byung-yu's power would help them in the battles ahead, but he asked Jinwoo not to force Byung-yu into unnecessary fights. Jinwoo brushed Yunho's hand off, reminding him that this was the second time Yunho had touched his shoulder. But then, after a brief pause, a small smile crept onto his face. This time, Jinwoo felt that Yunho's gesture wasn't about authority or orders. It was a sincere request. Walking toward Shadow Byung-yu, Jinwoo agreed with Yunho. Cancel extraction. Slowly, Shadow Min Byung-yu began to fade, his form dissolving back into the afterlife. Before disappearing completely, he cast a final smile toward Yunho. Yunho stood still, returning the smile with deep respect. It was hard, but he knew this was the right decision. The silence that followed was heavy, leaving the hunters with mixed emotions as they watched one of their heroes leave for the final time. Meanwhile, the helicopter had arrived at Jeju Island, ready to pick up the hunters. Through the heavy rain, the hunters walked toward the helicopter, sadness clearly etched on their faces. Once everyone got in, Jinwoo turned to Yunho, telling him to leave first. There was still something he needed to take care of. From a distance, the remaining swarm of ant monsters could be seen flying over Jeju Island. Jinwoo summoned Kaisel and quickly hopped onto the dragon's back. He decided to pave the way and wipe out the remaining monsters scattered around. Kaisel spread his wings, soaring into the sky with Jinwoo. As they flew, Jinwoo took out every remaining ant monster, making sure the hunters could leave the island safely. Meanwhile, aboard the Japanese warship where the Japanese team had gathered, Hoshino was still visibly shaken, and the other Japanese hunters approached him, eager to know what had happened. Hoshino, trembling, muttered that the monster he saw was no ordinary enemy. Even Go Teruji couldn't stand a chance against it. There wasn't a single hunter who could defeat a monster like that. Sugimoto stepped in to calm Hoshino, telling him that the raid on Jeju Island was over. Hoshino's eyes widened in disbelief. It sounded impossible. Sugimoto then recalled Ruji's words about a powerful hunter from Korea. He began to wonder if Sung Jinwoo was the one who had defeated that monster. Suddenly, a crew member reported that a swarm of ants had been detected near the ship, and the hunters were immediately ordered to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, Jinwoo returned to the ant nest to clean up the remaining monsters. His shadow mages cast fire magic, instantly burning the unhatched ant eggs inside the nest. Jinwoo felt both surprised and lucky. Even by destroying unhatched eggs, he was still earning extra experience points. Opening his inventory system, he retrieved the Demon King longsword, an incredible weapon he had acquired from the Demon King. With the sword in hand, Jinwoo gave it a try. His first swing unleashed a crackling bolt of lightning that shook the ground. Amazed by the sword's power, he thought it would be a waste to just leave it sitting in his inventory. Jinwoo decided to use the sword to clear out the remaining ant eggs in the nest. The scene then jumped to the United States, where Michael Corner and David Brennan, the director of the American Hunter Bureau, were watching a replay of the Jeju Island raid. Michael commented on how extraordinary it was for a hunter to control hundreds of creatures, though it was a shame he came from such a small country like Korea. David stared at the screen intently before sharply asking Michael what else he knew about this hunter. Michael handed him a file, explaining that the fire incident involving Sung Il-hwan was connected to Jinwoo. Sung Il-hwan had been found alive in an A-rank dungeon. Although he claimed to be a Korean hunter, there were doubts about whether he was human or a monster. Further investigation revealed that Jinwoo was his son. David looked stunned. He realized this was a rare opportunity to recruit someone like him, even if it risked straining relations between the US and Korea, especially after America had successfully recruited Dongsu. Still, a hunter like Jinwoo was worth fighting for.
After what felt like a considerable amount of time dealing with the eggs, Jinwoo finally heard the sound he had been waiting for, a notification indicating that he had leveled up. He had reached level 100. Satisfied with his progress, Jinwoo returned the Demon Monarch's sword to his inventory and made his way to the Queen's den. There he found the massive corpse of the Ant King, still lying in the same spot where it had fallen. Standing before the Ant King's lifeless body, Jinwoo felt a sense of unease. The creature seemed unusually troubled, even in death. Curious, Jinwoo stretched his hand forward and attempted to extract its shadow. As he did so, the surroundings flickered between light and darkness, as if a dying light bulb was struggling to stay on. For a brief moment, everything went dark, and Jinwoo found himself unable to feel anything. In that short period of darkness, Jinwoo wondered if the extraction had failed, but just as quickly as the darkness had come, it faded, and Jinwoo was back in the light. He heard a notification sound, signaling that the shadow extraction had been successful. Behind him, the Ant King's shadow began to take form, wreathed in dark energy, an embodiment of the creature's raw power. Jinwoo turned to face his new creation, the shadow of the Ant King. The air was thick with tension as Jinwoo stood at the edge, shadows swirling around him. He stared down at the formidable shadow soldier with a commanding presence, asserting his dominance over it. The Ant King's shadow, now under Jinwoo's control, was a powerful new addition to his ever-growing army. As Jinwoo examined the newly created shadow, the information about it appeared before him. He squinted to read the details floating above the shadow's head. It was at level 1, but what caught his attention was its rank, general rank. This was a new rank for Jinwoo, as he had only encountered standard, elite, knight, and elite knight ranks among his shadow soldiers so far. The discovery of this new rank led him to believe that this shadow was significantly stronger than any of the soldiers he had extracted before. Given the power the Ant King had possessed in life, Jinwoo wasn't surprised by this outcome. Satisfied with the extraction, he turned his attention to the next target, the Queen Ant. But just as Jinwoo was about to proceed, the shadow of the Ant King spoke, catching him off guard. The shadow, now kneeling on one knee with its head bowed, addressed Jinwoo as "My King" and made a request. The voice coming from behind him caused Jinwoo to freeze in place for a moment. The shadow then asked Jinwoo for a name. Jinwoo reflected on the unwavering loyalty his other shadow soldiers had always shown him and noticed that this new shadow exhibited the same trait. He couldn't help but wonder how the Ant King's shadow was able to speak. When he asked, the shadow simply simply responded that it had always possessed the ability to speak. Jinwoo pondered this revelation. The shadow's ability to speak seemed to be linked to the fact that it had been capable of communication before becoming one of his soldiers. However, this was not the case with his other soldiers such as Iron, Min Byung-yu, and Tusk, who had all lost their ability to speak after being turned into shadows. Jinwoo realized that the key difference between them and the Ant King's shadow might be their rank. Perhaps, he mused, the ability to speak would return to his other soldiers once they reached a higher rank. With this in mind, Jinwoo questioned the Shadow Ant further, asking if it truly wished to follow him despite the fact that he had been the one to kill it. The Shadow Ant's response was unexpected. It explained that it didn't consider itself to have been killed by Jinwoo, but rather reborn through his powers. The Shadow expressed immense happiness at this rebirth and vowed to follow Jinwoo for the rest of eternity, addressing him as both master and king. It then once again requested a name. Jinwoo realized that giving this shadow a simple name like Ant or Bug would be inadequate. He wanted to choose a name that would set this shadow apart from the other ants. A name suddenly came to Jinwoo's mind, Baru, the name of an author who had written a novel titled The Ants. It seemed fitting, and so he bestowed this name upon the shadow. Baru, the newly named shadow, expressed deep gratitude towards Jinwoo, acknowledging him as master. Jinwoo decided it was time to extract the Queen Ant's shadow. After successfully summoning Baru, the Ant King's shadow, his confidence was high. He approached the Queen's corpse with determination and performed the shadow extraction. With the command, "Arise," the Queen's shadow emerged. It was an enormous beast, identical to the Queen in life. Jinwoo was pleased with the success of the extraction and was about to celebrate when he noticed something strange. As soon as the Queen's shadow was created, Jinwoo sensed a weakening in the connections between himself and his Shadow Ant soldiers. It was as if the lines binding them were covered in a fog, growing faint and unstable. This sudden change puzzled him. Jinwoo turned to Baru, seeking an explanation. He asked Baru why his bond with the Shadow Ants had weakened. Baru explained that the Queen possessed an inherent power to rule over her colony. As long as the Queen's shadow was alive, she retained the right to command the ants, even those who had been turned into Jinwoo's shadow soldiers. Jinwoo then asked Baru about the Queen's mana levels, which seemed surprisingly low considering her rank. Baru explained that the Queen's mana had primarily been used for reproduction when she was alive. Now that she no longer had a physical body, her mana had decreased, making her unsuitable for battle. After putting all the information together, Jinwoo realized that the Queen's shadow wouldn't be as useful to him as he had hoped. He saw no reason to keep two commanders who could potentially conflict with each other. He gave the command to terminate the extraction, and the Queen's shadow dissipated into smoke, vanishing into the air. Jinwoo then addressed his shadow soldiers, instructing them not to collect the essence stones from the ants. He reminded them that all the essence stones would be used to reconstruct Jeju Island's infrastructure and compensate for the damages caused by the raid. There was no need for them to keep any of the stones for themselves. Afterward, Jinwoo removed the gem from Baru's corpse. The essence stone was a beautiful pitch black jewel radiating power. Jinwoo decided that this one stone from Baru's corpse would be sufficient for his needs. His thoughts then turned to the remaining ants. Jinwoo knew that there were still many left on the island and wondered if he would be able to eliminate them with the troops he had available. As he pondered this, Baru spoke up, informing him that their enemies were struggling in the skies due to the lack of a leader. Without a leader, the ants were unable to maintain their formation and were scattering in confusion. Jinwoo asked Baru if he knew how many ants were left. Baru replied that there had been 8,700 ants before the attack, and approximately 4,000 had survived. Jinwoo was surprised, as he had thought he had taken down a significant number during the earlier battle, but there still seemed to be quite a few left. Finally, Jinwoo asked Baru if he could wipe out the remaining ants on his own. Baru, with unwavering loyalty, responded that he would follow Jinwoo's order without hesitation. In the midst of the ocean, the hunters aboard the battleships prepared for the oncoming threat. Jong-soo, the leader of the Night Guild, was the first to spot the danger, noticing that the ants were flying directly towards them. The battleship's artillery roared to life, firing at full capacity as the ants approached. The sky was filled with the sound of booming explosions. Mage hunters on board joined forces, launching devastating magical attacks that added to the chaos. The sky lit up with a series of bright flashes and explosions, creating an atmosphere of absolute absolute mayhem. Despite the relentless assault, the ants continued their advance, heading northbound towards the Night Guild. Sun Cahoon, the leader of the Hunters Guild squad, quickly issued commands to his guild members, urging them to prepare for battle as the ants closed in. The famed guild hunters also received their orders, instructed to slaughter every ant in sight. The fiend guild hunters, led by their determination to reclaim their honor and glory, steeled themselves for the fight, knowing that a single ant was as strong as a B-rank hunter. They formed battle positions, aware that falling out of formation could mean certain death. Amidst the tension, Minsung, the A-rank hunter, trembled in fear. His anxiety was palpable, and another hunter nearby couldn't help but notice, thinking that despite his rank, Minsung was clearly out of his depth. The sky grew darker as the ants nearly reached the ships, their numbers filling the horizon. Juhi was struck with fear as she realized the ants had already reached the shores of Hyundai. She questioned whether they were strong enough to face such a powerful enemy. The ants, with their wings spread and mandibles ready, closed in rapidly, their speed leaving little time for the hunters to react. Sung Cheol noticed just how fast the ants were approaching. They were now only an arm's length away, ready to attack. But just as the ants were about to strike, a blue streak of light flashed through the sky. It moved with incredible speed, tearing through the ants in midair, leaving them destroyed in its wake. Juhi and Cheol were both stunned by the sight. Juhi wondered what could have caused such a powerful strike, while Cheol marveled at the speed of the attack, unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed. The mysterious blue streak was none other than Baru, executing the command of his master Jinwoo with deadly precision. Efforts to exterminate the ants continued relentlessly for 2 days in the southern regions of South Korea. The hunters and soldiers worked tirelessly, determined to eradicate every last one of the deadly creatures that had caused so much devastation. Meanwhile, the coast of China was not spared from the ant invasion. The relentless insects had already made their way into Chinese waters, causing widespread alarm. The crew on board a Chinese ship could hardly believe the sight before them. The ants had flown all the way to China, and the crew had not been able to sleep for 2 days as they battled against the relentless swarm. As the second wave of ants approached, now within shooting range, the crew awaited the order to fire. However, before they could act, an unknown hunter on board the ship stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around. The hunter looked up at the sky, watching as the horde of ants drew closer. Despite the overwhelming numbers, he remained unfazed. With a determined expression, he unsheathed his swords and prepared for battle. The hunter clashed his swords together, unleashing a powerful energy that sent shockwaves rippling through the sky. The sheer force of his attack was devastating, causing explosions that echoed through the air. The bodies of the ants, unable to withstand the hunter's might, were split in half by the shockwaves. Their remains dropped into the ocean below, a testament to the hunter's overwhelming power. With the threat neutralized, the hunter calmly sheathed his swords, his expression one of mild disappointment. The battle had been too easy for someone of his caliber. As he surveyed the aftermath, the hunter couldn't help but think of the ant Sung Jinwoo had battled against. Had that powerful creature still been alive, the hunter mused that the battle might have been more challenging, perhaps even enjoyable. But with the ants now defeated, there was little left to do. The hunter sighed, lamenting the lack of a worthy opponent, and watched as the waves of the ocean carried away the remnants of the once formidable swarm. In the Scavenger Guild of the United States, tension filled the air as Laura, a high-ranking member of the guild, contemplated the situation at hand. She was deep in thought about the connection between Hwang Dong-soo and Sung Jinwoo, two figures whose paths had crossed in a deadly incident. Laura suspected that Sung Jinwoo might have been involved in the death of Hwang Dong-soo's older brother, which could explain why Hwang Dong-soo was now seeking revenge. As Laura considered the implications of this, she turned her thoughts to Thomas Andre, the guild master of the Scavenger Guild. Thomas Andre, a man known for his formidable power and influence, had been looking forward to meeting Sung Jinwoo in person. However, Laura realized that with the current circumstances, this meeting might be more difficult to arrange. The potential for conflict between Hwang Dong-soo and Sung Jinwoo complicated matters further. Thomas Andre was not one to take threats lightly, especially when it concerned his guild. To him, Hwang Dong-soo was not just a member of the Scavenger Guild, he was considered the property of the guild, something that Thomas Andre would fiercely protect. The Scavenger Guild, in turn, was Thomas Andre's domain, and he would not tolerate anyone, not even the government of the United States, interfering with what he considered his. On the third night of the Jeju Island raid, soldiers, along with hunters from the Knights Guild, the representative guild in the Yeongnam region, arrived on Jeju Island. Their mission was to collect essence stones and stand by in case of another incident. Jong-soo, the guild master of the Knights Guild, shared a story from his past as he led the group. Jong-soo reminisced about a man who never had much luck. This man, determined to be the best at what he did, dreamed of becoming a gold medalist. He trained relentlessly, pushing himself to become stronger, even going on strict diets to compete in a lower weight division. He endured intense training sessions, and everything seemed to be in place for him to compete in the Olympics. This was his lifelong dream, and he had passed all the doping tests. The night before the competition, he had a good dream and was in top condition. However, fate had other plans. A manometer evaluation revealed that he had been awakened, and he was subsequently barred from competing in the Olympics. Jong-soo revealed that the man in his story was himself. Despite having to give up on his dream of competing in the Olympics, he found a new calling. He vowed to create the country's best guild, a goal he was still pursuing with unwavering determination. As they continued their mission, Jong-soo proudly displayed the top quality essence stones they had collected. These stones represented his dream of creating the best guild in the country. Another hunter made a comment about the possibility of embezzlement, but Jong-soo dismissed it, focusing on the task at hand. The group continued to sweep the area, ensuring it was free of mana. Jong-soo reassured the others that it was safe to relax, as they believed the area had been thoroughly cleared. However, as they moved forward, Jong-soo spotted an ant that had been hiding. With swift precision, he sliced it with his blade, eliminating the threat. Jong-soo acknowledged that while there might be a few stragglers, there was no need to worry too much. He and the Knights Guild were there to protect the area and ensure the safety of everyone involved. As Unate glanced to the other side, his eyes widened in shock. He spotted something alarming and quickly alerted Jong-soo, the guildmaster of the Knights Guild. Jong-soo, sensing the urgency in Unate's voice, turned to see what had caused such a reaction. The soldiers in the group also noticed the disturbance, and a sense of unease spread among them as they saw a figure emerging from the shadows. The figure was an unknown stranger, someone who should not have been on Jeju Island. Jong-soo immediately questioned the presence of this stranger, as the only people authorized to be on the island were the soldiers and agents from the association who had assigned the mission to them. The stranger, however, did not fit any of these descriptions. Jong-soo and the other hunters could not determine whether the figure was human or something else entirely. The stranger moved closer, and the hunters hesitated to open fire. Uncertain of what they were dealing with, the figure had glowing yellow eyes, sharp teeth, and wild black hair, giving him an otherworldly appearance. He spoke in a language that none of the hunters could understand, a language that sounded as though it belonged to beasts rather than humans. Jong-soo and the others were taken aback, unsure of how to respond. The situation grew even more tense when it became clear that the stranger was not alone. A simple snap of fingers sent a piercing sound through the air. Within seconds, Jong-soo and his guild members went limp and collapsed to the ground. The stranger was accompanied by an elderly elf with blue skin and long silver hair. The humanoid beast, who had initially emerged from the shadows, questioned the elf's actions. However, the elf calmly explained that there was no need to cause any further commotion, and that he had only put the hunters to sleep temporarily. The humanoid beast confirmed that he had checked for the presence of a particular power, and the elf, puzzled, wondered why someone was helping the humans. The humanoid beast speculated that no one could truly understand the motives behind such actions, and suggested that if the elf was curious, he could ask the individual in question himself. The beast remarked on the stench of rotting ants in the area, and imagined how that woman would have reacted if she had witnessed the scene. The elf, however, was not deterred by these thoughts. He stated that the hunt would proceed as scheduled, and that this situation did not change anything. The elderly elf then twirled his hand lightly, creating a black hole in midair, a gate just big enough for a single person to pass through. The humanoid beast mentioned that he believed one of them was present in South Korea, and suggested taking care of the issue before leaving. The elf, however, preferred to leave the matter to someone else, not wanting to get involved directly. He left the interpretation of his actions up to the humanoid beast, stating that the beast could think whatever he wanted. As the elf's voice trailed off, he disappeared through the gate, which closed behind him with a faint sound. The humanoid beast, now alone, muttered under his breath, calling the elf a coward. He looked down at the humans lying helplessly on the ground, knowing they would soon wake up. Deciding that there was no need to complicate matters further, the humanoid beast quietly retracted his hand and vanished through another gate, leaving the area as silently as he had appeared. After the humanoid beast vanished through the gate, the island returned to an eerie silence.